Hello, everyone, and welcome to another installment of Draco Sinister. I apologize that it has actually taken me a week to get out this particular installment. I know I said I would try to release them at least once a week, but things just kind of got away from me last week. So, I'm thinking, without further ado, let's just get right into it. Chapter 2: Ink, Blood, and Brotherhood. For a moment, Draco just stared at the other boy, not knowing if he had heard him correctly. "She's what?" "Breaking up with me," said Harry again, still with the same look of utter astonishment. "She's not," said Draco with conviction. "You're reading the letter wrong. Give it to me." It was doubtless a mark of how very shocked Harry was that he did so, holding it out mutely for Draco to take. Draco snatched it and read it quickly. "Dear Harry, I saw Victor this afternoon and realized that I have really loved him all these years and still do. I'm going with him to his home in Bulgaria, where we can be together. You will always be a dear friend of mine, but I have realized that my heart belongs to Victor alone. Please don't try to contact me. Hermione." "Not a lot of room for interpretation there," said Harry in a doom-laden sort of voice. "Pretty straightforward." "She can't be in love with Victor Krum. She just can't be," protested Draco, scanning the letter again in an attempt to find some other analysis of Hermione's short missive. "I mean, I always figured if she left you it would be for me. Sorry," he added, looking up at Harry. "But really, Victor Krum?" Harry just looked at him blankly. "Why not Victor Krum?" "Because he's a big stupid Neanderthal who can't even pronounce her name." "It doesn't matter," said Harry hollowly. "She doesn't love me." He took the letter back from Draco, looked at it as if it were a weird foreign object, and stuffed it in his pocket. "I guess we'd better get to class." "What?" "Class," said Harry. "We've got Lupin's class at 9. "You mean you're just going to go to class as if nothing—" But Harry had already turned around and was wandering off down the hallway. Draco stared after him in disbelief. He couldn't quite understand why Harry was acting like he'd just been given the Dementor's kiss. If it had been him, he'd be yelling and throwing heavy objects. Maybe Harry was in shock. Draco had read about people being in shock. You were supposed to make them lie down and cover them with a heavy blanket. However, knocking Harry down in the hallway and throwing a blanket on him seemed unfeasible. "Hello, Draco," said a voice at his elbow. Fleur, just who he didn't want to see. "Fleur, I've got to get to class right now." "You have class with Lupin, am I correct?" "I have the same class. We can go together," she announced brightly, and took his arm as he started walking. Draco picked up his pace until he was walking alongside Harry, who was still looking expressionless. "Hello, Harry," chirped Fleur. Harry said nothing. "Is Harry all right?" she said in an undertone to Draco, who was spared replying as she spotted Professor Lupin coming around a bend in the hallway up ahead. He nodded a greeting as his eyes fell on them, then ducked into the classroom. "Now he is very good-looking," said Fleur complacently. "Not like those other professors. This one has, "Animal magnetism," suggested Draco. "Oui," said Fleur and smiled. Draco was relieved when she let go of his arm and dashed into the classroom after Lupin. He turned quickly to Harry. "Potter, are you sure—" "I'm fine, Malfoy." Draco wanted to tell Harry that he didn't look fine, As a matter of fact, he looked as if he were going to be sick. But there was no opportunity. Students had begun pouring into the classroom, and Harry went with them. Draco followed and sat down where he could keep an eye on him. He wasn't sure what this weird calm of Harry's betokened, but was sure it wasn't good. For his own part, Draco felt fairly stunned. Hermione running off with Victor Krum? It was about as in character for her as forgetting to study for final exams. Nobody watched her like he did, or saw the way she looked at Harry like he did. She couldn't possibly be in love with Victor Krum. Very pleased to be teaching this class. Professor Lupin's voice broke in on Draco's thoughts, and he glanced up. Lupin was standing behind his desk, on which sat a large glass globe and a stack of books. He had just finished writing the title of the class on the board. Fundamentals of Magical Transformation for Magids. Fleur was sitting in the front row, staring fixedly at him, and Draco began to wonder what might happen if Lupin noticed. Fleur's direct stare had a tendency to cause males of almost any age to begin acting in an eccentric manner. Now, Lupin went on, you all know that as Magids, you have access to abilities that other wizards do not. Whether you choose to learn to utilize these powers to their fullest is up to you, but you all have the potential. First, however, you must learn what these abilities are. He turned again and wrote another word on the board. Telepathic magic. A faint whisper of surprise ran around the classroom. Reflexively, Draco turned and looked at Harry, who was staring fixedly at his quill as if it held all the secrets of the universe, and didn't appear to have heard a word Lupin had said. It used to be called the art of voiceless speaking, Lupin went on, but for many years it's been considered a myth. For a Magid, however... Draco stopped listening to Lupin. He leaned sideways towards Harry, who was still staring at his quill with a blank expression, and said out of the side of his mouth, I was just thinking about this Hermione thing, Potter, and BANG! The glass bottle of ink on Harry's desk exploded like a miniature bomb. Glass and ink flew in every direction, splattering an astonished Harry, as well as his desk and clothes. Draco touched his face, and his hand came away black and red. Ink mixed with blood. A flying shard of glass had cut his cheek. Some of the students sitting near Harry and Draco started to mutter in surprise. Ignoring them, Draco stared at Harry with sudden alarm. Harry wasn't any good at controlling his emotions. In fact, he was terrible at it. And if the shock was starting to wear off, then... BANG! The glass globe on Lupin's desk blew apart. Lupin jumped back, and several students ducked, as fair-sized shards of glass flew over their heads and shattered against the opposite wall. Draco jumped to his feet and grabbed the back of Harry's robes. Come on, Potter, he said. But I didn't. Come on! Draco backed out of the classroom, half dragging Harry, as Lupin and the rest of the class stared at them in astonishment. Once outside in the hallway, he kicked the classroom door shut and let go of Harry, who sat down hard on the floor and looked up at him with a dazed expression. What the hell do you think you're doing, Potter? He yelled, fuming. He was covered in ink and bits of glass, and was fairly sure that his shirt was permanently ruined. Get a grip on yourself! I'm not doing anything! Harry yelled back furiously. Crash! One of the stained glass windows set high in the wall above their heads shattered, raining down bright bits of glass. Given Harry's already proven abilities to conjure up hailstorms of owls and blue snow, Draco was afraid it might, at any moment, start raining toads, or bricks, or sharp, pointy objects. Stop it! Shouted Draco, covering his head. Do you want to bring the whole school down around our ears, you stupid prat? What? Said Harry, looking at him in bewilderment, as a large, ominous crack appeared in another window. Potter, Draco began again, softly this time. I want you to know that what I'm about to do is for your own good. And he kicked Harry hard in the ribs. Said Harry, or something very like it, and doubled up, gasping. When he got his breath back, he looked up at Draco in fury. You asshole, Malfoy, he said, getting to his feet and punched Draco in the eye. Owie! Squealed a voice that Harry vaguely registered as Fleur's. He looked round and saw that the rest of the class had poured out of the room to see what was going on. You mustn't eat Draco, the Villa girl continued in dramatic tones. You will ruin his face. Lupin, on the other hand, looked ready to spit fire. Harry, he began in a voice that dripped icicles, you will explain yourself. Harry stared at Lupin, looking dazed, but said nothing. In my office, now, thundered Lupin. Reluctantly, the two boys followed Lupin down the hall to his office, aware of the curious stares of the other students at their backs. Lupin yanked the door of his office open, ushered them inside, and hissed, Sit down and don't move till I get back, and slammed the door shut. It was suddenly very quiet, except for the gentle ticking of the clock on the office wall. Harry looked at Draco out of the corner of his eye, and saw that he was grinning. What's funny, Malfoy? He asked, with a mixture of curiosity and indignation. Kept you from burying us all in a mountain of shrapnel, didn't I? Said Draco, whose eye was now turning a deeper shade of purple the longer Harry looked. Distracted you at the crucial moment. Feel better now? Harry, who did indeed feel better, felt suddenly guilty. Malfoy, he said haltingly, I'm really, really sorry that I... Forget it, said Draco cheerfully. The look on your face when I kicked you in the ribs, that was so worth it. Harry's feeling of guilt vanished. There's just no point apologizing to you, is there? Draco waved a dismissive hand. I don't ever apologize. Why should you? You don't apologize? Like you don't faint? Right, said Draco. What else don't you do? I don't cry, I don't dance, he shuddered, and I don't think Hermione is in love with Victor Krum either. Harry winced. Can we not talk about that? Come on, Potter, said Draco, who had wandered over to Lupin's desk and was casually examining the objects that lay on it. Think about it. It makes no sense. Hey, Potter, look at this. Harry came over to see what Draco was looking at. Glancing over the other boy's shoulder, he saw a large and rather musty-looking book, the pages of which were old, yellowed, and powdery. It was open to a page which showed woodcut illustrations of various objects. Something that looked like a gauntlet, a rather nasty-looking skull, and underneath both those things, a drawing of a sword. It wasn't detailed, but the jewels in the hilt were definitely green. The heading across the top of the page read, Demonic Artifacts, a User's Guide, The Living Blade. The writing beneath that was very hard to read, being splotched with bits of candle wax, and occasionally a suspicious-looking brown stain. For which this blade was at one time, and still is, the body or spirit of a demon. Whosoever possesses such a blade must know its nature. Such a blade can be born, but at great cost to the bearer. Whether that cost be of body or of soul depends on the nature of the exchange. If one comes across such an object, one must know that it is a talisman of purest evil, and should only be dealt with in a manner pursuant to its destruction. Purest evil, said Harry thoughtfully. That sounds bad. What sounds bad is that he's going to destroy my sword, said Draco, looking furious. I never should have lent it to him. What was I thinking? You don't know he's going to destroy your sword, said Harry reasonably. It might not be one of these living blade things. Draco looked at Harry, who had the sense to look sheepish. Okay, it probably is. But if it's a talisman of purest evil, do you really want to keep it? Hell yes, said Draco. Harry shook his head. I do not understand you, Malfoy. The office door opened, and they both jumped several feet. It was Lupin, of course, looking very grave. He came into the office, shut the door behind him, and moved to sit behind his desk. He looked from Harry to Draco, and said, I'm sorry I shouted at you. You alarmed me. I'm not much a fan of physical violence, and Harry, I rather thought you weren't either. Oh, he's not, usually, said Draco cheerfully, but Hermione stomped all over his heart with hobnail boots, so he's a bit edgy. Hermione? Lupin echoed, looking astounded. Harry, who had gone red, scowled and said nothing. All right, never mind, said Lupin, then added, I've always thought it was unfortunate that Magid powers, which are so closely tuned to both wizarding skills and one's control over emotions, tend to kick in right around adolescence, when one has very little of either. Harry, stop scowling. I'm sure Hermione would never, do anything to... All right, that's none of my business. But if you're really upset, Harry, maybe you should talk to Sirius? Oh, said Harry. No, I don't think so. Actually, that's not a bad idea, said Draco. He could beat up Victor Krum for you, Potter. Victor Krum? Repeated Lupin, raising his eyebrows. Hermione went to Bulgaria with Victor Krum last night, said Draco, who seemed determined to act as Greek chorus, and she wrote Harry a letter, but I've been telling him I don't think she meant it, because, I mean, if you've ever seen pictures of Krum, he's only got one eyebrow, and Potter here might not be winning any beauty competitions, but that's impossible, said Lupin, who was looking both exasperated and amused. It isn't, said Draco. He really only has one eyebrow. I mean, said Lupin, that Hermione, running off with Victor Krum to Bulgaria is impossible. Harry looked startled. Why do you say that? Because, said Lupin, Victor Krum is in London. He led the Bulgarian Quidditch team to a stunning victory against Switzerland just this morning. I heard a play-by-play on the Wizarding Wireless. He's most definitely and certainly not in Bulgaria. Percy, come on, said Ron, exasperated. Can't you be helpful just this once? Percy, please, added Ginny, looking entreatingly at her older brother, or at least all of him that was visible, which was his head, floating in the fireplace. No, said Percy firmly, looking very cross. I am not going to give you Victor Krum's home address in Bulgaria. Do you know what kind of trouble I could get into with the Department of Magical Games and Sports? We're not going to track him down and slaughter him, Perce, said Ron irritably. We just want to send a letter to Hermione, see if she's all right. Percy made an irritated noise. Look, Ron, I'm sorry your girlfriend ran off with Victor Krum, but he is very famous and rich, and you really can't blame her. Just try and be a good sport about it, won't you? Hermione is not my girlfriend, said Ron through gritted teeth. She is Harry's girlfriend. And anyway, if you had seen how she was acting, you'd also think that... He broke off, not sure if he should say what his mind already feared was true. What? Said Percy in a patronizing tone. That she was under some sort of hex, or a love potion, he finished in a hushed voice. Ron, Percy exclaimed, horrified. Use of love potions is completely illegal. You know that. Victor Krum would never do that. He's a famous international figure. So is Voldemort, said Ginny crankily. Percy and Ron turned to her. Don't say the name. Why not? Harry does. "You're not Harry," said Ron, and turned back to their brother. "Percy, just because he's a famous Quidditch player, that doesn't mean anything. He was obsessed with Hermione 2 years ago. It was really disgusting. He's so much older than her." "Ron," Percy interrupted, "do you have any idea how busy I am right now? The Ministry is in an uproar. This morning, Minister Fudge got 500 owls. 500. And guess who has to answer them all? Me." Ron and Ginny stared at each other, then back at Percy. 500 owls, said Ron in surprise. "Why? What's going on?" Percy turned an apoplectic shade of purple. "Don't you even read the paper anymore?" he shouted. "We're too worried about Hermione," said Ginny, looking startled. "Well, go read it," snapped Percy, "and don't bother me again until you have." And he vanished. Ginny and Ron stared at each other, then got to their feet. Without speaking, Ginny went to the front door, collected the Daily Prophet, and brought it inside, where she spread it out on the kitchen table. "Oh," she said faintly, catching sight of the headline. "Ron?" Ron crossed the room to stand next to her and looked down at the front page of the paper, which read in huge letters: "Dementors abandon Azkaban. The Ministry of Magic has confirmed at this time that the Dementors, longtime guards of the wizarding prison Azkaban, have abandoned their posts. There is no word as to where they might have gone. According to Cornelius Fudge, Minister of Magic, it appears that they have simply vanished. However, no prisoners have escaped, and the Dementors have been replaced by fully trained and qualified wizards from the Agency for Magical Law Enforcement. The Ministry has been discussing the matter of replacing the Dementors for a long time now," adds Percy Weasley, assistant to the Minister of Magic. "Really, this is all for the best, as it gives us an opportunity to implement our new program." "Percy, you git," said Ron under his breath. "How is this a good thing? Dementors running rampant all over the countryside?" "But they're not," said Ginny. "It says they've just vanished." Ron was biting his knuckle thoughtfully. "Like Hermione," he said. "You don't honestly think those two things are related, do you? Or do you think they all ran off with Victor Krum?" "Well, no, obviously. But if there's one thing I've learned being friends with Harry all these years, it's that when weird things start happening all at the same time, they're usually connected. That and a big spider's nobody's friend." Ginny shook her head, staring anxiously out of the Pigwidgeon-free sky. "I just wish we would hear from Harry," she said fretfully. "I want to know what she told him." Ron looked at her out of the corner of his eye. "If she really did break up with Harry, would you be all that upset?" Ginny didn't answer. "If you keep pacing like that, Potter," said Draco, not opening his eyes, "I will nail your feet to the floor, and don't think I won't." Harry had been pacing up and down the room since they had left Lupin's office, and it was now 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Draco sighed, opened his eyes, and sat up from his bed. "Potter, you know what?" Harry said, and stopped. "You're right. Pacing is stupid. I'm not going to pace anymore." "Good," said Draco in relief. "I'm going to fly to the Burrow instead." "What? That's the most ridiculous—" Draco began, then broke off. "Actually, that makes a lot of sense. We can't be more than, 4 hours from there by broomstick? If we leave now, we can be there at 9, and back here before breakfast. It's a lot better than waiting around for Weasley's owl to fly there and back." Harry was looking at him with a half-smile. "We?" "I'm going with you," said Draco, standing up and pulling his black traveling cloak out of his trunk. Harry reached for his own cloak. "Is this the part where you tell me that we're a team now?" "No," said Draco, straightening up. This is the part where I tell you that if you don't bring me with you, I'll go right to Lupin and tell him you've flown to England, and when you get back, they'll expel you." Harry reached for his broom. "You wouldn't tell on me, would you, Malfoy?" "I've made a long and brilliant career out of telling on you, Potter. Don't think I'm going to stop now." When she heard the knock on the door, Ginny ran to answer it, half hoping it would be Hermione, but it wasn't. She recognized the person at the door immediately. Hating someone as much as she hated him had branded a certain image into her mind. He looked different than he had a year ago. Taller, much browner, and if possible, even blonder. But it was definitely Draco Malfoy, wearing a black traveling cloak and carrying a broomstick in one hand. "Hello," he said, looking at her as if he didn't quite remember who she was. "It's Ginny, right? Is your brother home?" She shut the door in his face and stood there, glaring at it. There was a moment of stunned silence from the other side of the door. Then another voice spoke, a very familiar voice, causing Ginny to jump. "Gin," said Harry's voice, "it's me. I'm, out here with Malfoy. Would you mind letting us in?" She opened the door and looked mistrustfully at the two boys standing on the doorstep. Draco looked startled, and Harry looked tired and pale, but with the same green eyes, untidy hair, and lightning bolt scar. He was taller, too, and was holding his firebolt in one hand. "It's good to see you, Ginny," he said, although he looked a little wary. Ginny felt her lip trembling. "Harry?" she said. "Harry? We've been so worried. Hermione—" Ron appeared behind Ginny, saw Harry, and then saw Draco. He didn't smile, but said, "You two had better come in." Draco looked at Harry, who seemed startled at this unusual cold reception. Harry shrugged, and they both stepped over the threshold to follow Ron and Ginny into the kitchen, where they all sat down, except for Ginny, who busied herself making tea. Draco noticed a large jar of peanuts sitting on the table. He pried the top open and began methodically working his way through the jar. Ron glared at him. "Why don't you help yourself to some peanuts, Malfoy?" "Don't mind if I do," said Draco cheerfully, then caught the look Harry gave him. "What? I was hungry. We haven't exactly eaten much today. You could use some peanuts too, Potter." "No thanks," said Harry, who wasn't hungry in the least. "I'm more interested to hear about where Hermione got off to." At Harry's look, Ron divulged all. The events of the past 2 days, to the news in the Daily Prophet. "We did try to contact you," he said when Harry pressed him as to why he and Ginny hadn't informed him immediately after Hermione took off. "I bet you passed the owl we sent on your way here. Pig was gone, so we had to get a municipal owl from the post office in town." Harry barely appeared to hear this. He seemed lost in thought. "So, when she left, she seemed odd to you?" "I told you that already," said Ron with a hint of impatience. "I mean, besides the sizable weirdness involved in her going off with Krum in the first place, yes, she seemed odd." When we talked to Percy, Ron told him that he thought Krum might have used a love potion on her," said Ginny firmly. "I know they're illegal, but he's got a lot of money and knows a lot of people. I bet he could get a hold of one." "But if all he was trying to do was get her to fall in love with him, then what's all this misdirection stuff about them going to Bulgaria when he's right there in London? And if he is in London, then where is Hermione?" asked Draco. "Maybe she doesn't want us to know where she is," said Harry darkly. "Maybe she wants us to leave her alone." "Don't be ridiculous," snapped Draco. "And why is it that out of all of us, you are the only one who seems prepared to believe that she left here of her own free will?" "I don't, said Harry irritably. I just don't think that hurrying off to Victor Krum in a mad, jealous rage is going to... Hurrying off to Victor Krum in a mad, jealous rage is exactly what you should be doing, retorted Draco. The question remains, did she, or did she not, run off with Krum? And who's going to know the answer to that better than the man himself? I suggest we find him, post-haste, and ask politely. And if that doesn't work, we'll hold him down and threaten to shave off his eyebrow. Ron cleared his throat. I agree with Malfoy, he said, looking slightly sick to his stomach, as if the words, I agree with Malfoy, agreed with him about as much as a double helping of cockroach clusters. When we read in the paper that Victor Krum was in London after all, we got right back in touch with Percy, and he told us that all the international Quidditch players are staying at the World Quidditch Club off Diagon Alley. I think we should go there and talk to him. I've been there, said Draco, with my father. There's a lot of security. I mean, those Quidditch stars, they're real celebrities. We can't just stroll in. Well, I thought I could pretend to be Percy, said Ron hopefully. I mean, we do look a bit alike, and I could say I'm Percy Weasley and I need to see Victor Krum. Why? Interrupted Draco. He was looking at Ron with narrowed grey eyes. Why do you need to see Victor Krum? Well, said Ron, I hadn't worked that bit out yet, but this, said Draco, is why you should let me do the planning. You? Said Ron, standing up and glaring at him. I'm the one in Slytherin, said Draco coolly, standing up as well and returning the glare. I'm the shrewd, underhanded one. I come up with the cunning plans around here, not you. You wouldn't know a cunning plan if it painted itself blue and danced naked on a hopsicle singing, Cunning plans are here again. That is not true, yelled Ron, losing his head somewhat. I have come up with very cunning plans. You're in Gryffindor, sneered Draco. Your idea of a cunning plan is, everybody on the count of 3. Ron lunged at Draco, but Harry stepped in between them, causing Ron to knock him into the stove and bang his elbow painfully in the process. A number of pots and pans clattered to the floor, and the mirror that hung over the stove shouted, Watch what you're doing, clumsy! Ron rubbed his bruised elbow. Damn it, Harry, he said wrathfully. Why'd you do that? Harry stood up, looking furious. All right, Ron, we need to talk. Outside, now. Still rubbing his elbow, Ron followed Harry out into the dark garden, leaving Ginny and Draco standing alone in the kitchen, looking nonplussed. Harry and Ron had walked about 10 feet from the house when Harry whirled around and said angrily, What the hell is up with you, Ron, letting Malfoy get to you like that? You know he's just trying to annoy you. He probably doesn't even have a plan. What the hell is up with me? Ron demanded, his fury making each freckle on his face stand out like an ink blot. What the hell is up with you, Harry? Did I give you permission to bring Malfoy to my house? Did I? You know what his father did to my father. You know how my family feels about the Malfoys. What do you think my parents would say if they knew he was here? Ron, I didn't think, began Harry, paling slightly. Yeah, that's just it. You didn't think. You don't ever think anymore. What's happened to you, Harry? Other than my girlfriend running off with a 7-foot Bulgarian Quidditch player? Ron threw up his hands. Don't even try to pass this off on Hermione running away, he snapped, positively shaking with anger. You show up here, all buddy-buddy with Malfoy. Oh, Malfoy's my roommate. Malfoy's gonna be my brother. Malfoy, Malfoy, Malfoy. And you know what kind of person he is? He saved my life, said Harry. He saved your life to get into Hermione's pants, said Ron in a cold voice. Didn't work, replied Harry, trying to grin. You don't know that, said Ron flatly. Harry's grin disappeared. That's not funny. I'm not trying to be funny, yelled Ron. I'm trying to make you wake up and see sense. He's not your friend. I know, said Harry. Ron paused and looked at him in surprise. I don't know what he is, said Harry, but I do know that I can trust him, at least where Hermione's concerned. He was willing to die for me. You can't say that about a lot of people. He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. You're my best friend, he continued. You know why? Because I chose you to be my friend. I didn't choose to have Malfoy in my life, but he is, and there's not much I can do about it. Ron leaned against the side of the house, cradling his bruised elbow. Some of the anger had faded out of his expression, and he looked tired now. I just don't get where Malfoy's trustworthy. You're either hugely self-confident or woefully deluded, and I'm not sure which. 2 reasons, said Harry. 1, Hermione cares about him, and as we all know, she's not stupid. You're losing me again, said Ron. Why is it okay that Hermione cares about him? I said she cares about him. I didn't say she was in love with him. She cares about you too, if it comes down to that. I'm not beating the crap out of you, am I? Ron sighed. The 2nd reason, said Harry, and the most important. He pulled his jacket open, unzipped an inside pocket, and took out a very battered object, which he handed to Ron. Ron stared. A sneakoscope? The one I brought for you in Cairo? I didn't even know you still had it. Harry smiled. It never goes off when Malfoy's around, he said. Ergo, he's trustworthy. Ergo, it's broken, said Ron, but smiled grudgingly back. Nuh-uh, said Harry. It's gone off a couple other times. When Malfoy and I were talking to Lupin, I'm pretty sure there was stuff he wasn't telling us. Really? Said Ron, interested. Like what? Well, like when we went into his office, he shoved his copy of the Daily Prophet into his desk. I don't think he wanted me reading about the Dementors vanishing. Well, he knows you're sort of allergic to Dementors. Yeah, said Harry. But I can't believe he thinks I'm as fragile as all that. I mean, after everything I've been through. And here he glanced at Ron. Everything we've been through, I should say. I wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for you. Harry looked faintly embarrassed now, but plowed ahead bravely. When Sirius and Narcissa get married, Malfoy will be my brother, technically. But you're my brother, really. I mean, if I could choose a brother, it'd be you. Ron was now slightly pink around the ears, but looked pleased. Well, he said, I mean, same here. Harry looked at him and grinned. Now what? Do we share a manly embrace? Nah, I think we're too inhibited, Ron said, and hit Harry lightly on the shoulder. I think we do that instead. Right, said Harry. And then I think we'd better go back inside before your sister eviscerates Malfoy with a toasting fork. In terms of his assessment of the success of Draco and Ginny's interaction, Harry was not far off. As soon as Harry and her brother had left the kitchen, Ginny walked over to the table, sat down in a chair, crossed her arms, and glared at Draco. He looked back at her, unfazed by her glare. He was used to being glared at. You look different, he said. Good different or bad different? Said Ginny. Good different, said Draco. You just got back from some foreign exchange program, didn't you? Yes, Ginny replied, then after a beat asked, Have you traveled much? Not unless you count the time my father tried to send me to itinerant trolls. Ginny frowned at Draco, who was looking back at her with a look of bland amusement on his face. "Are you trying to be funny?" "If I was trying to be funny," Draco assured her, "you would be rolling around on the ground laughing." "Still think a lot of yourself, I see. Same old Malfoy." Draco's eyes flashed. "Still in love with Harry, I see," he said with soft malice. "Same old Ginny." Going scarlet, Ginny stood up abruptly. "You're hateful," she said as nastily as she possibly could. At that moment, the door opened, and Ron and Harry came in. Ron looked from Ginny's red face to Draco, who had wiped the look of anger off his face and was looking innocent. "What's going on?" "Nothing," said Draco blandly. Ron opened his mouth to say something, but Harry interrupted him. "Right," he said, taking a deep breath. "If it's nothing, then we should really try to figure out what Hermione's gone off to, which means we're going to have to look through her stuff. See if there's any clues as to where she might be. But I, don't want to do it. Draco, how do you feel about going through Hermione's stuff without permission?" "I feel pretty okay about it," said Draco. "Somehow this is not surprising," said Ron. "Oh, for goodness sake," said Ginny impatiently. "Let me do it. I'm a girl, she's a girl, it's for her own good." Feeling somewhat chastised, the boys followed Ginny as she clattered up the stairs and opened the door to Hermione's room. It was beautifully neat, as Hermione's room always was. Her trunk lay at the foot of her bed, and Ginny wasted no time in unlocking it and rifling inside. When she found nothing there, she turned her attention to the desk, the drawers of which turned out to be mostly empty. Under the desk, however, she found a crumpled piece of paper, which she unfolded, read, and handed wordlessly to Harry. He looked at it and bit his lip. It was the letter that Hermione had started writing the day before and never finished. All it said was, "Dearest Harry, darling Harry, Harry, my love." He looked up and met Ginny's eyes across the room. "You don't really think there's the slightest chance she went up with Victor of her own free will, do you?" said Ginny, sounding tired. He looked down at the paper again, then folded it up and put it in his pocket. "Let's go talk to Victor Krum," he said. "Hurrah!" said Draco. "Let's go kick Victor Krum's ass." "We're not going to kick his ass," said Ron. "We're going to pump him for information." "Right," agreed Draco cheerfully. "And if that doesn't work, then ass-kicking makes a solid backup plan." "Speaking of plans," said Harry, turning to Draco, "what was your brilliant plan for getting us into the London Quidditch Club?" It was decided that Ginny should remain at the Burrow on the off chance that Hermione might try to contact them there, while Harry, Ron, and Draco went through the Weasleys' fireplace by way of Floo powder to get to Diagon Alley. One green flame ride later, they were standing at the front desk of the Quidditch Club, which turned out to be a large and extremely beautiful hotel-like building off of Diagon Alley. It was set back from the road, but they had recognized it immediately by the flag that fluttered from its roof. 2 crossed broomsticks on a red background, surrounded by a circle of gold stars. Hello," said Harry to the security wizard at the front desk. "I'm Harry Potter, and I want to see Victor Krum." The security wizard snorted. "Get along with you," he said, not looking up. Harry turned around and looked at Ron and Draco, who were standing behind him looking encouraging. He turned back to the wizard. "I'm Harry Potter," he said again, "and I want to see Victor Krum. He's expecting me." "You're not," said the guard, finally looking up, and broke off, staring from Harry's glasses to his lightning scar. "Caw," he said, "you are Harry Potter, aren't you?" "For 16 years now," said Harry evenly. "Is it true that you might be playing Quidditch for England next year?" inquired the wizard. Harry smiled. "It's possible." Victor was going to introduce me to some of his English players. You know, try to exert a little influence." The wizard looked ecstatic. "Harry Potter playing Quidditch for England!" "Well, don't tell anyone," said Harry, leaning an elbow on the desk. "It's meant to be a secret." "Oh, right," said the security wizard hastily. "I'll ring up to Mr. Krum for you right away," he added eagerly. "He left word he wasn't to be disturbed, but seeing as it's you, Harry... Can I call you Harry?" "Of course you can," said Harry, still smiling benignly. Usually he loathed everything having to do with his fame in the wizarding world, but at the moment he found himself enjoying it a bit. The wizard turned to the wall behind him, on which was a panel displaying a row of numbered buttons. He tapped one with his wand and said, "Mr. Krum, are you there?" A very tiny image of Victor Krum's face appeared on the smooth surface of the button. He looked cross. "What do you want?" "Harry Potter and..." the security wizard began and looked inquiringly at Draco and Ron. "They're friends of mine," said Harry. "And his friends are here to see you." There was a short silence. Then Krum said, "Very well, I will see him." Victor's image vanished, and Harry expelled a held breath as the wizard turned to him and smiled. "The Bulgarian team is upstairs on the second floor. Krum is the first door on your right. And can I have your autograph?" "See?" said Draco as they started up the staircase. "The best plans are the simplest ones, just like the best lies are founded on a grain of truth." "Is that a Malfoy family saying?" said Ron acidly. "No, but we do have a collection of sayings. My favorite was always, 'You can get more with a kind word and a really big stick than you can with just a kind word,'" said Draco cheerfully. "My father used to say that. Oh, look, here we are." Harry knocked on the door, which was opened a moment later by Victor Krum, wearing his red Bulgarian Quidditch robes and looking irritable. "Harry," he said, glanced with recognition at Ron and blankly at Draco. "It's good to see you, but it is rather late, is it not?" "I need to ask you something, Victor," said Harry. It's about Hermione." Looking startled, Victor stepped back and allowed all three of them to walk into his room, which, given the luxurious nature of the rest of the club, was actually quite sparse. There was a simple bed as well as a table and some chairs, and Quidditch equipment everywhere. Victor did not suggest that they sit down, nor did he look particularly welcoming in any way. Instead, he turned, crossed his arms over his chest, and growled, "Well, what is this about?" Looking at Krum standing in front of Harry and Draco, Ron began to see the foolhardiness inherent in their plan. For all Draco's talk of kicking Victor Krum's ass, it was evident that this was an unlikely proposition. Both Harry and Draco were built along the same lines, wiry and slender. Victor Krum, on the other hand, was both extremely tall and extremely wide, not fat, but burly. He could have bench-pressed Harry and had energy left to toss Draco the length of an Olympic swimming pool. Wordlessly, Harry reached into his pocket, extracted Hermione's letter, and handed it to Victor, who took it and read it. When he glanced up, there was obvious astonishment in his face. "This letter," he said, "is really from Hermione?" Harry nodded. "I know her writing anywhere." "It is a joke, then," said Victor, handing the letter back to Harry. "I have not seen Hermione in 2 years, and I certainly have not... I have never..." He shrugged. "Well, as you can see, I am not in Bulgaria. I do not know the meaning of this letter." "Did you write to her and ask her to meet you at the Leaky Cauldron?" asked Draco. Krum shook his head. "I did not." I saw you, said Ron abruptly. Last night. Hermione said she was leaving with you for Bulgaria, then got onto a broomstick with you. Well, it was dark, but it looked a lot like you. Victor was looking distinctly uneasy now. I know not where she is. I tell you, I have not seen her in my own I have no memory of seeing her. Then if you don't mind my asking, said Harry, where were you last night? Victor opened his mouth, then shut it again. He looked from Harry to Draco to Ron, all of whom were staring at him. Then he said, I don't remember. You don't remember? Echoed Ron. No, said Krum, looking very unhappy now. Yesterday I have Quidditch practice in the morning. Then I come back here. I think perhaps I go to sleep, because when I wake up this morning, I do not remember anything I did yesterday. So you're saying that you don't remember anything from yesterday or last night? Said Harry in disbelief. That is correct, said Krum. And on the day the words flimsy excuse were reinvented, we all stood around in awe and watched, said Draco. I tell you this truth, shouted Krum, looking agitated. I have no memory of yesterday, and when I wake up this morning I am very alarmed because... Because what? Asked Harry. Krum's expression of unhappiness deepened. It was evident he was fighting some sort of strong internal battle. Finally, he sighed and said, half to himself, I suppose I must. I suppose I had better. What? Prompted Harry, now nearly desperate with anxiety. When I wake up this morning, I see this, said Krum, and pulled up his sleeves. He held out his arms for their inspection. Deep scratches ran up Krum's forearms, and his left wrist was braceleted by 5 dark, red, half-moon-shaped indentations. Harry knew immediately what they were. The marks of nails that had been driven into Krum's wrist. Driven by someone who was trying to pull his hands away. He had a sudden image of Hermione struggling as Krum clamped his hands over her mouth and felt suddenly ill. But it was Draco who reacted first. He had his wand out and was pointing it at Krum before either Harry or Ron could move. He shoved the tip of it into the Quidditch player's sternum and said, Veritas. Waking up was like rising slowly upward through dark, murky water. Hermione lay still for several moments, drifting in the inchoate gray space between sleeping and waking. Vague images passed before her closed eyelids. A plume of black smoke, a train, a clearing between dark, wet trees. Faces she didn't recognize. Then Harry's face, looking tired and worried. But why? Hermione opened her eyes. It took a moment for them to focus on her surroundings. Then she sat up and stared around in astonishment. She was lying on the floor of a small, circular room, no bigger than her room back at the Burrow, although the ceiling of this room was at least 15 feet high. It was built out of ancient stone blocks. There was a door in one wall, made of oak and crisscrossed with strips of iron that looked almost as old as the walls. One window high above her head let in a tiny amount of gray light through the shuttered iron bars. There was no furniture, except for the quantity of straw piled on the floor, on which she was now lying. A sense of disorientation, more intense than any she had ever experienced, washed over her. These surroundings were not just unfamiliar, but alien, and in no way corresponded to where she had expected to wake up, safely tucked in bed at the Burrow. Hermione cast her mind back desperately. Where could she possibly be? The last thing she remembered was walking into the leaky cauldron with Ginny. Seeing Victor there, she had followed him into the back room, and then there was a loud rattling noise. Hermione looked up in panic and saw the knob of the enormous door beginning to turn. She tried to stand up, but couldn't. Her legs were still too wobbly. Instead, she skittered backwards on her elbows, away from the door. It opened slowly, and a tall, hooded figure entered the room. He, if it was a he, wore floor-length wizard's robes of thick green velvet, banded with silver at the throat, and gloves of black satin. Hermione opened her mouth to ask where she was, how she had gotten here, but her throat had closed up, and no sound came out. The wizard raised his hands very slowly, took hold of the hood of his cloak, and drew it back. Hermione screamed. And that is all for this chapter, guys. Quotes. Whosoever comes across such an object must know that it is a talisman of purest evil, and should only be dealt with in a manner pursuant to its destruction, is from the Evil Overlord list. Remember that thing? You wouldn't know a cunning plan if it painted itself blue and danced naked on a harpsichord singing "Cunning Plans Are Here Again" is from Blackadder. Right, and if that doesn't work, then ass-kicking makes a solid backup plan is from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. You can get more with a kind word and a gun than you can just a kind word, is Al Capone. As always, if you are enjoying this content, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and check out my Patreon. I have personal writings on there, which get released early access for my patrons before they are up here on this platform. And for higher tiers, I have spicy fan art, specifically of strawberry shortcake. I keep on forgetting what kind of spicy art it is. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you all in the next one. Good night.